My name is Mark Stellick. I'm a patrol commander for the police department. And I want to introduce our speaker here in a minute, but we are aware in this city, like a number of other cities, that there is seeming to be an increase in problems with coyotes and coyote-human conflicts. And while we haven't yet had a significant problem with it, as a matter of fact, almost no problem with it other than sightings of them, we want to make sure that everybody in town is informed and they know what to do and how to deal with that kind of situation, and then what the police department or animal control will do or not do for you on something like that as well. We know they're here. I can speak personally to that. I was at our city garages on Saturday, and I drove through there, and there was a coyote walking down the railroad tracks at 2 o'clock in the afternoon right in front of my car. So they're here. Clearly we know that. And what we want to do is provide you with some information to help you manage that and deal with that and minimize any conflicts that we may have. So I'm not an expert. That's why you're not going to hear me talk for the next 45 minutes or so, but Lynsey is. So I'm going to read you a little bit of her bio so that you know from what she speaks here, and then I'll turn it over to her. So Lynsey White Dasher, she is the urban wildlife specialist for the Humane Society of the United States. As the urban wildlife specialist, Lynsey helps urban and suburban communities across the country find effective and humane solutions to human-wildlife conflicts with species including coyotes, Canada geese, white-tailed deer, and beaver. Her experience with coyotes includes completing research and data analysis for the Cook County Coyote Project in Chicago, Illinois, the largest study of urban coyotes in the country. She has also published an analysis of coyote attacks on people throughout the U.S. and Canada. Prior to her work with coyotes, Lynsey completed research on human-wolf conflicts for Defenders of Wildlife and international human-wildlife conflicts for the Bushmeat Crisis Task Force. Lynsey obtained a Master of Science degree in Conservation Biology and Sustainable Development from the University of Maryland and a Bachelor of Science degree in Zoology from Ohio State University, the Ohio State University in 2002. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lynsey and let her hopefully provide you with some valuable information this evening.
Well, good evening. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking some time out of your evening to come here tonight and learn more about coyotes. As he mentioned, this is my third time actually in the Minneapolis area in the past 6 months, so I know this is a growing issue for you. How many of you have seen a coyote in your neighborhood? Oh, actually a lot of you. Good, well, you're in the right place. And as he was mentioning, you're actually in a great position here in Bloomington where you're getting ahead of the game. So you can teach these coyotes that you've seen the rules of what is acceptable and what's not acceptable in your urban areas, so you don't have situations like attacks on pets or aggression towards people. So you're in the right place, and I think you'll learn a lot. So we will have time for questions at the end. If you have a quick question, feel free to raise your hand, and I can clarify any. I don't mind doing that at all. So what I'm going to cover tonight is first a pretty brief but background on coyote ecology and behavior. Then I'll talk about the different types of coyote conflicts and why coyotes are in Bloomington, why are they here. Then I'll talk about coyote conflicts and how we can prevent and solve coyote conflicts, which really focuses on two things: changing coyote behavior and changing our behavior too. And then I'll give some tips for how to coexist with the coyotes that we know are already here, and they're not going to go anywhere, so we are going to have to learn how to coexist with them, but we can teach them how we expect them to live by our rules here. Okay, so I always like to give a good brief but a background in coyote ecology and behavior, because if we want to change coyote behavior, if we want to understand what they're doing, we have to understand their ecology and why they do what they do. So if you look at a coyote, and a lot of you have seen a coyote, so you know what they look like, they actually often look a lot bigger than they are. And that's because they have really long legs and they have a lot of fur. So those long legs are actually adapted for their life in the grasslands, where they would run through really tall grass in search of their prey, which are actually really small mammals like mice and rabbits. So they can run really fast through the tall grass and hunt for those rodents. And these long legs, again, and that fur make them look sometimes like they're really big, but usually, especially in this area, they're only about 25 to 35 pounds. So they're actually pretty small, but they're really fast. They are the second or third, depending on how you classify, fastest land mammal. And they're also really, really smart. So those Wile E. Coyote cartoons, those are complete fiction. Coyotes are actually really smart. They would be able to outsmart the roadrunner. They would be able to catch him. They wouldn't be falling for these stupid acme tricks. They're really smart, and that's why they're able to live here with us, because they can learn how to live in urban areas. They actually can learn how to cross roads. We've seen them crossing 6-lane highways. They can learn how to avoid us, and they can also learn how to take advantage of food that we leave out for them, which I'll talk about. So that's one of the big reasons why they do so well here. And another reason is they're just really, really flexible in their diet and their habitat requirements. So what do coyotes eat? Well, the simple answer is just about anything. They're actually omnivores. They're not carnivores. They will eat plants as well as meat. So one of the big things that they actually eat are fruit. But again, the primary source of their diet are mice, rats, rabbits. So they're actually doing us a service here by providing free rodent control for us here in our neighborhoods. But again, they also eat a lot of fruit. They even eat grass and insects. So really a lot of what they're eating, almost all of what they're eating is natural food items. Now, these numbers here are from the Cook County Coyote Project, which is in Chicago. It's the biggest study of urban coyotes in the country. And you can see here, out of these radio-collared coyotes, which they've had over 600 in the past 10 years, only 3% of their diet from this study was human-associated food. So that's trash that people leave out, garbage, food scraps. Only 1% were pets. So by and large, coyotes out there, even in very urban environments like Chicago or like here, are actually not eating a lot of these food items, even though these items tend to make the news when they do happen. In terms of the social structure of coyotes, there are two different types of coyotes. The first type are the resident coyotes. These are the ones that live in family groups, kind of like wolves. There's one alpha pair, and then there are about 3 to 5 other coyotes that live in that group. And they can be the offspring or the siblings of those coyotes. So only one pair in the group will mate, and the rest will help to raise the pups that year. These resident coyotes, they defend their territories from other coyotes as a group. So how many of you have heard a coyote howling in your neighborhood? That's how they defend their territories. So when you hear them howling, it doesn't mean that they're hunting. It doesn't mean that they're out to kill your pet. It actually is what they do to defend their territories. So these coyotes as resident groups, they don't hunt in groups like wolves do. Again, they're hunting mice or rats, so that's not a meal they're going to want to share with another coyote. So coyotes are out hunting on their own or maybe in pairs, but they get in these groups largely to defend their territory. So these resident coyotes have territories that are fairly smaller because they're defending them actively, and they don't overlap with other coyote groups. Then we have the transient coyotes. These are the solitary coyotes, or they might be a pair of coyotes that are out on their own. They're typically the younger coyotes that have just been kicked out of the family group, and they're looking for their new home. So these coyotes, since they're on their own or just with a pair, they're not able to defend their territory like the resident ones do. So they have larger home ranges that overlap with one another. Coyotes are monogamous, so once they find a mate, they will stay together for life. Stan Garrett, who's the head of that Cook County Coyote Project, has said that he's never documented a case of divorce of coyotes in the wild, and he's studied over 600 coyotes, so they stay together. Of course, if one of them dies, they will find a new mate, but the male and the female both help raise the pups. So there's 3 different biological seasons when it comes to coyotes. Mating season, December through March. This is when, of course, again, just that one pair in the coyote pack will have their pups. An interesting thing about coyotes is that they can adjust their litter size based on what's going on that year. So if there are less coyotes that year, maybe because the population has been hunted or because food is more scarce, it's been a bad winter, they'll have less pups. But they'll have less pups. Or if there are less coyotes, they'll have more pups. If there are more coyotes, they'll have less pups, and I'll get back to that in a moment if I was confusing, which I probably was. Okay, the next season is pup rearing season. That's what we're in now. So this is, of course, when the coyotes are raising their pups. This is the only time of year that coyotes use a den. So the rest of the year, they're not using a den. So this time of year, they're a little bit more localized to that area where the pups are. Again, the whole, the whole coyote group will help raise those pups, typically about 4 to 7 pups. And they'll stay in the den for about 6 weeks, then they'll start going out with their parents. The female coyote will often have multiple denning sites, so if she feels threatened in any way, she'll move those pups sometimes 2 to 3 times throughout that season. And the last season is dispersal season, so that is September through December. That is the time of year when those yearling coyotes are kicked out of the group and they become transient coyotes, and they're off looking on their own. So in terms of conflict, just quickly, I want to talk about these 3 seasons. The first season, I just want to go back to that slide again. During the mating season, coyotes are much more territorial during this time of year because they're mating, they're holding on to their mate, and they want to make sure that no other coyotes are coming around. So this time of year, sometimes we have conflicts with dogs, especially larger dogs. And that's because the coyotes see these dogs coming into their home range. Usually these are off-leash dogs, so dogs that are running loosely through a coyote's home range. So sometimes you will see conflicts there. So the best thing, and I'll talk more about how to protect pets, but the best thing there is to keep dogs on leash, especially during that time of year. Pup rearing season, sometimes we see conflicts with dogs, smaller dogs, and especially if they're located very close to the den. And usually, again, these are off-leash dogs. This time of year, dispersal season, we typically don't see as many conflicts. Sometimes you'll see conflicts with those young, inexperienced coyotes that are running through. Someone's leaving food outside, they might take advantage of that. Okay, so in terms of habitat needs, coyotes live in all landscape types. They don't just live in forest preserve, they don't just live in natural areas. They actually can live in very urbanized landscapes in very close proximity to people. And we've actually found that within their home ranges, they will go out of their way to avoid people. So coyotes that have a home range, for instance, that is 80% very urbanized, 20% natural area, they'll actually spend the majority of their time in the natural part of their home range, even though it makes up a smaller percentage, because they're going out of their way to avoid people. How many of you have seen this picture before? This is a coyote that wandered into a Quiznos sub shop. So this was in downtown Chicago. This is a Quiznos. And this is, of course, their little Snapple cooler. It was July, it was a hot summer day, and they just had their door open. And this coyote just wandered in, and he went and sat in the cooler. And he just sat there, not really sure why he did that, but he wasn't bothering anyone. He was just sitting there. And some people even continued to eat their sandwiches while they came, and then animal control came and got him. But the really interesting thing that I think about this story is the public's reaction. So, of course, this was a big story, and the news came out and interviewed people, and they were asking people, what do they think about this? And person after person in downtown Chicago kept saying, well, what in the world is a coyote doing here in downtown Chicago? And the truth is, there are a lot of coyotes in downtown Chicago. People just don't know they're there because they're going out of their way to avoid people. Okay, so why do you have coyotes here, though? Why do we have coyotes in Bloomington or in an urban area at all? Well, first of all, we have urbanized so much of the country. So this is a satellite image of the U.S., and you can just see at night how much urbanization we have caused. If you see the percentage of land that used to be rural is now urban. Most of our land now is urbanized. So, coyotes don't have a lot of natural area, just like a lot of animals. So they are really good at living in our urban areas. Just like deer, just like Canada geese, some of these species that we consider to be too much in our urban areas, they actually do really well, and they take advantage of this. But also, there are a lot of reasons why urban areas are good for coyotes. One is there's plenty of habitat. They do well here. They don't need a lot of forested natural areas. They do just fine in these little fragments. And there's plenty of food. Again, as we mentioned, there's plenty of rodents for them to eat, Canada geese, small mammals, there's plenty of food for them. A lot of times when people hear about coyotes coming into their neighborhood, they think, oh, these coyotes are here to come eat our pets. They're coming into the neighborhood because there's not enough food out there. They're coming in to eat our pets. And that's just not true. There's plenty of natural items for coyotes to eat here. And it's good to have them here, to take care of some of these animals that we might consider too plentiful. But another thing is they really don't have any competition here. They're really the biggest predator in our urban areas. So we don't have a lot of bears or wolves in our urban areas. They really are literally the top dog. So they do really well, and they take advantage of it. But don't get me wrong, if we're feeding them, they're going to take advantage of it. Coyotes are smart. They're going to eat whatever is easiest to eat. So if they can come into a neighborhood and someone's leaving a bowl of pet food outside or leaving their garbage overflowing, and a coyote can come eat that and nothing bad happens to them, then they're going to do that. So, some of these sources of food are obvious. Pet food, again, garbage cans. Some of them are not so obvious. So bird feeders, we may not think would be an attractant. And they're not attracted to the bird seed, but the bird seed falls on the ground, and that attracts rodents, and that attracts coyotes. Fruit trees, again, they love fruit. So if you have a fruit tree and the fruit's falling to the ground and it's fermenting, they love that. It's actually a big draw for coyotes. Compost piles, they're great for the environment, but again, they attract coyotes, so there are things you can do to make that less appealing. And then, unfortunately, if we're letting our small pets run around unattended, that can also be an attractant. And of course, the worst is intentional feeding. So whether that is purposely leaving food out for coyotes, or maybe it's for raccoons or squirrels or whatever it is, that, of course, is a huge attractant, which we want to avoid. Okay, so in terms of coyote sightings, what does it mean? A lot of you said you've seen a coyote. So what does that mean exactly? Is it something to be worried about? Well, coyotes are actually naturally diurnal, which means they're most active at dawn and dusk. So when we see a coyote during the day, it's not necessarily a cause for concern. It doesn't mean that the coyote is rabid or sick. It doesn't necessarily mean that the coyote is aggressive or something to be concerned about. As long as that coyote runs away when he sees you, then it's nothing to be concerned about. Coyotes are naturally very afraid of people. So if you see a coyote and he sees you and he runs away, that's really nothing to be concerned about. Again, most people have no idea there are coyotes living near them. So again, if you see a coyote in a field hunting mice and he doesn't run away from you, that's okay. However, sometimes coyotes learn that people are not scary. So they become habituated, which means they've lost their fear of people. And we have actually taught them that without realizing it. So coyotes naturally are afraid of us, but all of you that raised your hand, I don't know what you did when you saw a coyote. I know what I did the first time I saw a coyote. I said, wow, how neat is that? And I looked and I got my camera out and I just stood watching the coyote for as long as I could. Well, I didn't realize I was teaching that coyote that I'm not a threat and I'm not a danger. And so when we do that, we're reinforcing to coyotes that they can come into neighborhoods, they can even approach us, and nothing bad is going to happen to them. So we've taught them that. But the good news is we can reteach them, which we'll talk about. So again, coyotes get habituated when they learn that people are not scary, that nothing bad is going to happen to them when they come into a neighborhood, and it's almost always also because of food. They come in to get food, nothing bad happens to them, they get less and less afraid of us. Okay. So how do we prevent coyote conflicts? Okay, so pets. It's really great that you haven't had these types of incidents here. In other areas around here, like Eden and Edina, they have had attacks on pets. So it's definitely something that we want to avoid. And it is avoidable with just a few special precautions that you want to take with your pets. So again, coyotes will normally hunt small rodents, but at the same time, if there is an unattended pet, if you have a small dog or cat that's outside and you're not with them, that small mammal looks really similar to a groundhog or a rabbit that a coyote would eat naturally. So if your dog or cat is outside unattended, a coyote might view that as a prey source. That doesn't mean that if a coyote takes a cat or a small dog, that coyote is going to bite a person next. Because again, that coyote views that as his natural prey. So that does not indicate a danger towards people, but of course we don't want this to happen. We love our pets. I love my pets, you love your pets. So we don't want this to happen. So the best way, and I'll talk more about more specific ways, but is to always be with your pet, have your pet on a leash, be out there with them, or make sure that you coyote-proof your yard, which I'll talk more about. Larger breed dogs is much less common for a coyote to attack a larger breed dog. As I mentioned before, this is typically a territory-related thing, often in breeding season, which is during the wintertime. Usually it's a dog that's off-leash, that's going through the territory. Typically it's more than one coyote, and that's because they're defending their territory again. So the best way to prevent this is always have your dogs on leash, especially during that breeding season. So just a few more tips. When you're outside, always want to be with your pet if possible. Have them on a leash, preferably a leash that's 6 feet long or less. If you have one of those retractable leashes and your dog is 20 feet away from you on a leash, the coyote might not realize that dog is even with you. So preferably on a shorter leash. If you are out with your pet, if it's a small pet and you see a coyote, you want to pick up your dog or cat. If it's a larger dog, put yourself in between the coyote and your dog. And never ever let your dog play with a coyote. It might seem silly to say, but I know of people whose dogs have actually gotten bitten in this way. And it seems like fun at first. They seem like they're playing, but the thing about dogs is that they don't understand coyote language. So the coyote is sending them a message, they don't get it, and things pretty quickly can get aggressive. So you never want your dog to play with a coyote. Okay, so again, for small dogs, always be with your dog if possible, have them on a leash. If you let your dog outside unattended, again, I wouldn't recommend that, but it's especially important at night not to do that. Coyotes also are so smart that they will learn your routine. So if you let your dog outside every night at 10 p.m., the coyote in your neighborhood knows that. So, take some precautions, go out there with them if you can, turn on some lights, do some things, make some noises, which I'll talk about. Again, pick up your dog if you see a coyote. Larger dogs, be extra vigilant during that breeding season. Always use a leash. Don't allow your dog to play with a coyote. Okay, cats. Unfortunately, the only way to completely protect your cat is to always keep them inside. Not just from coyotes, but from raccoons, from cars, from disease, from all kinds of things. There are ways you can take your cat outside if your cat really loves to go outside. I know this sounds silly. I actually did this with my cat this past weekend. You can try putting him on a leash and harness, getting a cat enclosure, building a catio. It's a new term that I like. There are things that you can do to let your cat outside and have fun, but you just want to protect them from coyotes. Because again, cats are so similar to a coyote's natural prey base that they're just not safe from coyotes, unfortunately. If you do have cats that are always outdoors, or maybe you care for a feral cat colony, there are some things you can do. Most importantly is to control, attracting them by the food, the cat food. So if you have to feed your cat outside, do it, and pick up the food as soon as they're done. Again, the coyotes will learn what time you feed your cats, and they'll learn that, but if you pick it up right away, that's the best way. You can provide some escape routes for them, some protection. We have some of this information on our website. So there are some things you can do to help protect cats if they're outdoors. But again, we'd recommend that they stay inside. Okay, so in terms of coyote-proofing your yard, I don't know that any yard is completely coyote-proof, but if you have a fence, it has to be at least 6 feet tall to keep a coyote out. Unfortunately, anything less than 6 feet tall, a coyote can just jump right over. So if you have something that's 6 feet tall or higher, what they have to do is actually jump up on the fence and then jump over the fence. So it happens pretty quickly, you may not see it, but what you can do is actually put something on top of the fence that keeps them from jumping off. And I'll show you some examples of that. Also remember that they can dig underneath, so you want to reinforce the bottom of your fence so they can't do that. Also, coyotes are ambush predators. So if you've heard of an encounter where a coyote came and attacked a small dog, it is often described as the coyote came out of nowhere and ran off with my little dog. Well, that's what they do. They hide in the brush and then they pounce and they attack. So you want to remove hiding places around your yard where a coyote can be hiding if you have a pet, especially if it's a small pet. And again, I'll keep saying this, that, another way to protect your pets is just to reduce the attractants that you have in your yard or your neighbor's yards that are attracting coyotes to your area. There are some other things that you can try as well. I don't have a lot of data on how effective these are, but motion-activated lights or sprinklers, those can help if a coyote's coming into your yard at night. Those can discourage them, especially the sprinklers. So here are some pictures, sorry I keep doing that, to illustrate what some of the points that I just made. If this were your house in here in this fence, you can see how, first of all, this little fence here is not going to keep a coyote out of your yard at all. Just a 4-foot fence. That's not going to keep a coyote out. Now, if you can imagine if you let your dog into this yard and then you walked inside and went away, you can see all this brush where a coyote could be hiding and just waiting to pounce on your dog. Whereas if this were your yard, again, this fence is not going to do anything to deter a coyote, but at least you can see that there's no coyote there, and then hopefully you'd stay out there with your dog at the same time. So, you don't have to remove all the vegetation from your yard, but if you trim up underneath a few inches, then at least you can see that there's not a coyote lurking there before you let your dog outside. This is an unattractive but inexpensive solution for keeping that coyote from jumping over your fence. So again, this only works if your fence is at least 6 feet tall. But this is just some chicken wire, keeps the coyote from jumping and pushing off. This is a better solution. This is called a coyote roller. You can go to coyoteroller.com and actually see a demonstration of how the coyotes try to jump over the fence. And what this does is it's very loosely rolling. So the coyote jumps up, it actually gets propelled backwards. It can't get a grip on it. Also helps keep your dog in the fence too, if you have a dog that likes to try to get out of the fence. It even keeps birds from perching on it. It rolls so loosely. So you can buy these off the website. They have different colors to match your fence. They can be a bit pricey, but you can try to make one on your own. With PVC piping, the key is to have it roll really loosely. But again, your fence must be at least 6 feet tall for this to work. Okay, so do coyotes attack people? So when coyotes come into neighborhoods, especially when we start having incidents where coyotes attack pets, this is always what people get concerned about, understandably. Is a coyote going to come attack my kid or my grandkid? And the truth is these incidents are very, very rare. There have been some cases that happen every year, usually less than 6 bites per year. Most of them happen in Southern California and the Arizona area. And compared to the number of dog bites per year, 4.7 million dog bites per year, the number is very, very low. But it is something that we want to keep in mind. We definitely want to learn why these incidents happen and prevent them. Most of these involve minor injuries. Many of them were feeding or pet related. So in many of these cases where we had good information, we found out that people were feeding, not necessarily the people that were bitten fed these coyotes, but their neighbors did or someone else did. And so these coyotes became aggressive. Or someone was walking a pet or was with a pet and the coyote went to attack the pet and the person intervened and got bitten. So again, we want to keep these instances, we want to prevent these and learn why they happen and take tips to prevent them. But we also want to keep in mind what the true risk is. You're more likely to be killed by a champagne cork or a golf ball than you are to be killed by a coyote. So just keep that perspective in mind. We do want to take some extra safety precautions for kids, not because they're more likely to be bitten by coyotes than adults. They're not. Just as many adults are bitten than kids, but they are smaller. So we do want to take some steps. One of the most important things is that kids should never run from a coyote. No one should ever run from a coyote, but especially kids. Coyotes, just like any predator, like a mountain lion or a bear or a wolf, if someone runs from them, that initiates that chasing behavior that they have, and sometimes if someone runs, they might chase them and then they might actually get bitten that way. So kids should never run. They want to be big and loud, essentially. They want to stop, make yourself look big, be loud, wave your arms, walk away slowly, don't run, and tell an adult. And, we can teach kids, what do coyotes look like? We can teach them the difference between what a coyote looks like and what a dog looks like. But a better approach, I think, is just to teach kids never to approach any dog or any animal that looks like a dog, because again, kids are more likely to be bitten by a dog than a coyote. So, never pet any dog or animal that looks like a dog unless an adult says it's okay first. Okay, so what do we do about these coyote conflicts once they're happening? Well, again, very importantly, we have to change coyote behavior. When coyotes are acting in ways we don't want them to, we do have to change that. And we also have to change our behavior that contributes to that. So to avoid conflicts with coyotes, for us, again, we need to eliminate anything that's attracting them, any sort of food sources, and we want to take precautions with our pets, and some precautions with our kids as well. Now, how do we change coyote behavior? This is where we have a few more options. So traditionally, the approach has been to remove coyotes, either on a large scale through large-scale hunting programs or bounty programs, or selectively trapping and removing problem coyotes. There's relocation, moving coyotes somewhere else. And then there's hazing, which is a training method to teach habituated coyotes to be afraid of people again and stop this behavior. So relocation, unfortunately, doesn't work. It always sounds like a great option. We're not harming the coyotes, we're not killing them, we're just moving them somewhere else. It sounds like a win-win situation, but unfortunately it's a lose-lose situation, because not only does it not work, the coyotes are going to do everything they can to get back home, but it's also not humane because they almost always die in the process, and it's very stressful for them. The Cook County Coyote Project actually monitored 12 coyotes that were relocated, and they found that none of them stayed where they were put. They all try to get back home, and usually what happens is one of two things. When you dump off a coyote in a new area, there almost always is going to be another coyote there. You're putting them in what you consider to be ideal habitat. Well, of course, a coyote already lives there, and they're not going to appreciate this new coyote that you're dropping off. So they're going to get in a dispute. The new coyotes are often injured or maybe even killed. Secondly, these new coyotes don't know where they are, and often what happens is they're not familiar with the traffic patterns and they get hit by cars. This is mostly what happens. So we're not solving anything here, and it's not a humane approach, which is usually why this method is suggested, in lieu of killing them. So then in terms of removal, again, we have two kinds. The first one is to, on a large scale, remove coyotes. So, thin down the population, reduce the numbers. The thinking is if you reduce the coyote population, then we'll reduce the number of conflicts that we have going on. The problem, though, is that doesn't work. One of the big reasons is that when you remove coyotes from a population, the remaining coyotes will have more pups. Again, as I mentioned, most coyotes live in these resident groups where there's just one breeding pair. If you kill that pair, all of the females in that group will breed. So whereas you would have only had one breeding before, then you'll have 3 or 4 breeding. So you have more females breeding, they'll often start breeding earlier, and they'll have more pups. So you can see how pretty quickly you can get this increase in populations. One of the big indicators that this doesn't work is that we've been doing this for hundreds of years. Our government's USDA Wildlife Services kills 80,000 coyotes per year. We've been doing this for many, many years, and we have more coyotes than we ever had before, and they've expanded their range more than they ever had before. So it's one indication that it's not working. Again, also, in addition, if you remove coyotes from a certain area, that's going to create a vacancy. And remember, you have those transient coyotes out there that are looking for a new home range. They're going to say, hey, look, there's a new area, let's move in. So they're going to move into that area. So you're not going to get rid of coyotes that way either. Just to demonstrate this quickly, there was a study in Colorado, and they said, okay, well, there must be a point where you remove enough coyotes, and then you see a decrease in population. So they did an experiment. They took 92 coyotes, and they broke them up into one group where they killed coyotes in that group, and one group they left alone. In the one group, every year for 7 years, they actually killed 61 to 75% of the coyotes. And then after that time, after the 7 years, they stopped. and waited to see what happened. And they found within 8 months, the numbers were up to where they were before they started killing 7 years ago. So if you can imagine the time and energy that would be spent in trying to remove 71% of the population of coyotes here, I'm telling you that'd be a monumental effort. And then 8 months later to have that population rebound back to where it was before, that would not seem to be a very good investment of time, money, and energy. And again, it's because these coyotes, they had more pups, they started breeding earlier. Here also, interestingly, we found that they had more female pups than males. So a lot of things going on here as to why these populations rebound like they do. So a better approach, rather than just trying to remove a large number of coyotes, is to find these problem coyotes. So these coyotes maybe that have attacked pets or that are just seen hanging around neighborhoods, and just remove those coyotes. And that's certainly more humane than going on these large removal programs, but it's also very difficult. It's really hard to catch a coyote. They're very smart. They don't go into traps very easily. For every trap you set out, you'll get a dozen raccoons and opossums and probably some cats, maybe a dog even. And once you catch a coyote, it's even harder to catch the rest of the coyotes in that family group. So it's really hard to do, and even harder to actually locate that individual that's causing the problem and remove that specific individual. It takes a really skilled trapper to do that. And there are people that can do that, but typically they will spend weeks setting up cameras, doing surveillance, really doing their homework to find that coyote and remove them. And they typically charge thousands of dollars to do that. But also, even if they are successful in doing that, there's still problems with this. And one of them is, you remove that coyote that caused the problem. Okay, now you're creating this empty home range that's quickly going to be filled by another coyote. And if you haven't addressed the problem, you might just keep having these problems all over again. So you have to think about, the vast majority of coyotes out there are not causing any problems. We don't see them, they're not bothering us, they're not bothering our pets. So if a coyote has started behaving problematically, there's almost always a reason why. This usually leads to feeding, or maybe pets that are running around loose. So if those problems continue and we've removed a coyote, a new coyote comes in, and that's still going on, there's still pets running around loose, there's still food left out, you're probably going to that new coyote is probably going to do the same thing. So, so we're not teaching our coyotes anything when we do this, and we're not changing our behavior, we're not teaching ourselves anything. That's another reason why this just doesn't work. Okay, so this leads us to coyote hazing, which is a training method for changing the behavior of those habituated coyotes. So what we're doing is these coyotes that are not afraid of us, that are doing things we don't want them to do, we're teaching them, hey, this is not acceptable. So how do we do that? Well, there's a lot of ways to do it. If you see a coyote, so next time, all of you that raise your hands, next time you see a coyote, I want you to do one of these things. So I want you basically to be big and loud. You see a coyote, I want you to stop, and the easiest thing to do is yell and wave your arms and say, go away, coyote. Maybe run towards the coyote. You can take a whistle with you. You can even, have it while you're walking your dog. You see a coyote, you blow the whistle. If you're outside in your garden, you can take your water hose and you can squirt the coyote with your water hose. You can take an air horn with you. Do you guys want? You can do that. You can make, and that'll scare a coyote away. You can make your own hazing tools. So this right here is just a sippy cup with some pennies in it, but it can be pretty loud. You can take a soda can, you can put dead batteries in it, cover the opening with some duct tape, take that with you. You can take a walking stick. There's really no limit to the creative ideas you can come up with. But essentially what you're doing is you are focusing one of these activities at a coyote and you're teaching them again that we are scary. So the beauty of this, the beauty of hazing is that anybody can do it. Everybody here in this room can do it. You don't have to be an animal control officer. You don't have to be the crocodile hunter. You don't have to be a wildlife biologist. Anybody can do it at any time. And you can have a tool with you if you happen to have one and you think about it, but you don't have to. Anyone can do it at any time. And not only can everyone do it, everyone should do it. So what we're doing here is, again, we're teaching coyotes, and the great thing is they learn really quickly. And not only that, but they pass this information on to their family members and their pups. So when we see a coyote and we haze them, they're going to go back and they're going to teach their pups that lesson that we taught them. So by hazing one coyote, we're reaching many more. So again, what we're doing here, we're reestablishing their natural fear of humans. We're marking our territory in a way that they understand. So again, those coyotes that are howling at each other, that's how they're saying, hey, this is my territory. Stay out of my territory. So when we use our air horn, we're saying, hey, stay out of my yard. I don't want you in my yard. And they get that. So again, anytime you see a coyote and he's not afraid of you, he doesn't run away, I want you to do this. And just as importantly is that everyone do this, is that you don't not do this. So if everybody here on this side of the room leaves tonight and you say, oh, this is great information, and then you see a coyote and you do this, but then everybody on this side of the room says, this was so stupid, well, I'm not going to do that, and you see a coyote and you just ignore them, you're just all going to be canceling out the great efforts of these people over here. And it only takes a coyote a few times to be hazed for them to get the message, but at the same time, if they keep encountering people who don't haze them, then it's not going to work as well. So we really do need everyone to be involved. Another reason is because, if we have our animal control officers come out and do this, if you call and say, hey, I have a coyote in my yard, please come out and haze them, 99 times out of 100, by the time they get there, the coyote's going to be gone. And secondly, coyotes will learn pretty quickly that, oh, those animal control officer guys in the uniforms are scary, I'll stay away from them. But then you come out with your dog and they're not going to be afraid of you. So we need everybody of all shapes and sizes to be hazing coyotes. Okay, so hazing again, anybody can do it. You don't have to have a tool. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but there are just a few rules that you do have to follow. The most important one is that you have to have a connection with the coyote for it to work. So the coyote has to see you. When you're making that noise at him, he has to know you're doing it at him. So in other words, paintballing is a great way to haze a coyote. I don't know what the laws are here, if you're allowed to do that, but sometimes police officers do this and it's a great way. But if you're hiding behind a bush or a podium and you're paintballing a coyote, he's not going to understand. He's not going to understand where that pain come from and why it happened. He needs to see you. So, and there actually have been animal control officers who did this and they learned it doesn't work. Also inside a car, if you see a coyote and you're in a car and you honk the horn at them, they're not going to understand that either. And that's for a couple reasons. One, they hear car horns all the time. Coyotes hear all kinds of noise, all kinds of traffic noise, construction noise. They're used to tuning a lot of noises out, so they're not going to understand. And secondly, they're going to associate that noise with a car and not with you. If you're in your house and you see a coyote in your yard and you're on the second or third floor and you hang your head out the window and you yell, that probably won't work either. So the coyote has to see you and know that you're directing that action at him. If you see a coyote and you have a pet, a small pet or a small child, you want to pick up that pet or child and you want to put them behind you, what you're doing is you want the coyote to focus on you, not on your pet or your kid. If it's a larger pet, or child, you can put them behind you. But essentially, you want the coyote focusing on you. And this is the second most important rule. And this is where sometimes people have tried this with the best intentions, but it didn't work. When you haze a coyote, especially one that has never been hazed before and is very habituated, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll just look at you. They'll just look at you because they don't understand what you're doing. Or sometimes they may run away a little bit, 20 or 30 feet, and then they'll stop and they'll look at you. And what they're doing is they're trying to figure you out. They don't understand. And they're very smart. They're like a dog or a kid. They're testing you and they're trying to see what you do. So if you are blowing a whistle at a coyote and he runs away 20 feet and then stops and looks at you and you say, oh, okay, I'm done. That was great. I did my job. And walk away, all he's going to learn is that he just has to wait for you and you're going to leave. So what you have to do is continue hazing that coyote until he completely runs away. So the easiest way to do that is actually to run towards the coyote. So yell and wave your arms and run towards the coyote. If you're not comfortable doing that, that's fine. I want to mention, the reason that hazing works is because a coyote's first instinct when faced with a threat is to run away. They're built to run, they're very fast, that's what they're going to do. So that's why this works. But if you don't feel comfortable running towards a coyote, that's fine. Get louder. Use multiple methods. Basically, you want to intensify your hazing until they run away. And they will. Again, a variety of methods and people doing this is important. So people often ask me, what's the best technique? Do you recommend a whistle or an air horn or a hose or a squirt gun? What tool you use doesn't really matter, but it does matter that there's some sort of variety. If everyone in Bloomington is blowing whistles at coyotes, they might start to get habituated to whistles. So, we want to use some different techniques, but even more important is a variety of people. So again, we don't just want animal control officers in uniforms or police officers doing this. We want all of you doing it. This one goes in line with the first rule, but only use these techniques when you actually have a connection with the coyote. So in other words, if you decide that you're going to take a whistle with you every time you walk your dog, and you're going to blow that whistle if you see a coyote, that's great. But if you decide, well, just to be sure, I'm going to blow this whistle every time I walk through the park, just to be sure, that's not going to work, because what you're doing is just creating this background noise that coyotes are going to get used to. So again, you only want to do this when you have a connection with that coyote. And then this might sound like it's a lot of work, but really only 2 to 3 times per coyote or per coyote family group is all that you need. And the first time sometimes takes more effort, again, because that coyote doesn't know what you're doing. He may be very habituated, but it gets easier the second time, even easier the third time, if there even is a third time. Okay, so again, all of this works because the coyote has a chance to run away. So essentially, a few tips are, you don't want to haze a coyote that can't run away. So if it's very, very sick, it clearly cannot get up and run away, it's very sick, then you want to call animal control. You also don't want to haze a cornered coyote. You want to make sure that they have an escape route, that they can run away from you, of course. And young children can use all of these techniques, especially if you be big and loud. I would recommend that they do that. I might not recommend that they run towards a coyote, but they can be big and loud and call for an adult. Most important thing, though, again, is that they don't run away. Okay, so I just want to talk very, very briefly about Denver, Colorado, because they have a really innovative plan for managing coyote conflicts that focuses on hazing and education. So in 2008, they were having a lot of conflicts, many more than you do here right now. They were having attacks on pets, including large dogs. They even had some people that were bitten. They were all pet or feeding related. One of them, which is interesting, was actually a coyote that bit someone in a McDonald's drive-thru. They learned that the employees were feeding the coyote through the drive-thru window, and then an unsuspecting customer came up, pulled up to the drive-thru, and the coyote came up and bit the person. This person, the person did nothing wrong. But a lot of times that, unfortunately, is what happens. These coyotes learn that people feed them, and then they'll go up and they'll get aggressive. And they go up to people, hey, where's my food? Even though that person never fed them before. So all the incidents in Colorado we know were feeding or pet related. They have really good information there. But anyway, they had gone through the route of trapping and removing coyotes several times and had found that it just wasn't working. It kept having the same problems. So they came up with this plan that focused on collecting data, education and outreach, and hazing, and they've had a lot of success. Had no more people bitten by coyotes, pet attacks have dropped way down, they haven't had to remove any coyotes. So effective that people are calling in and asking, hey, what'd you do with all the coyotes? And the answer is they're still there. So when we're hazing coyotes, we're not moving them away. We're not pushing them to a new home range. They're still going to stay in our area. Coyotes are here to stay. That is a fact. We just have to teach them how to live with us. So when we haze coyotes, we're teaching them to become more nocturnal. We're teaching them to stay away from our neighborhoods and from our pets. So a coyote might still stay in your neighborhood. You might not come as close to your house or the houses, or he might come out late at night when nobody's out. So basically what we're doing is teaching them to avoid us. They're still going to be there. So this just shows how their conflicts went way down once they started hazing. So what Denver does, which is interesting, is they go out and the head of their program teaches. They have sessions like this, actually, although much less formal, in different neighborhoods that are having coyote conflicts, and they teach people in the neighborhoods how to haze coyotes, and then these people just go out and do it. So they have a lot of people involved, a lot of the community involved in hazing, and that really is why these numbers went down so much. So, and the reason I go through that is it's an example a model that works really well, and something that I always recommend that communities do, but it also just shows how important it is for everybody to be involved in the solution. So now I just want to run through a few examples of how hazing works in action. This is an example. This is actually an example from Denver. There was a park called Bible Park, which was a popular park. People would go walk their dogs, have picnics. They had some jogging trails where people would go, jog, walk their dogs. And they had a family group of coyotes that was causing a lot of problems. These coyotes were just lounging like this coyote is out in the middle of the day. People were right there. They clearly were not afraid of people. They were showing themselves to people. They were following people. So people were walking on trails and they were following them. They were also attacking dogs, including large dogs. So this is a situation where a lot of communities would set out traps to remove coyotes. But they had done that before and hadn't had success. So they decided instead to send out their park staff every morning to haze coyotes for 3 weeks. They used a variety of techniques, banging pots and pans, whistles, air horns, squirt guns. And they did that for 3 weeks. And after that time, this was about 3 years ago, they've had no more instances of, no more problems in the park. No more dogs have been attacked. We haven't had any instances of coyotes following people. No more aggressive behavior. No more coyotes lounging in the grass. The coyotes are still there. If you look closely, you can see the park staff see them in the early morning hours hunting rodents, but they're no longer making themselves visible to people. And this is what hazing can do. This is an example of just someone that went to one of those little neighborhood hazing training sessions that I talked about. So this was a guy who had a small dog, and he had seen a coyote in his neighborhood, and he was concerned. So he went through the hazing training, and he learned how to do it, and he came home. And one evening, he saw that coyote again in his neighbor's driveway. So he decided to go out and try to haze it. So what he did was he opened up his front door, stepped onto his porch, and started yelling and waving his arms. Go away, coyote. And the coyote just looked at him. So the man remembered he needed to intensify his hazing. And so he ran towards the coyote, yelling and waving his arms. And he actually had to get within 6 feet of the coyote before the coyote took off and ran away. But then he did. The coyote took off and completely ran away. So the next time the man saw the coyote, he went out and hazed it again. This time he opened up his front door, stepped onto his porch, started yelling and waving his arms, and that time the coyote ran off as soon as he did that, as soon as he started yelling and waving his arms. The third time the man saw the coyote, all he did was open up his front door, and the coyote ran away. And that was the last time he ever saw that coyote. So this is a pretty typical example of, this was a very habituated coyote. Normally it doesn't take that much effort, where you have to run that close to them. But this is an example of a coyote that was very habituated and pretty typical of how each time it got easier and easier to haze that coyote. So just in summary, what should you do if you see that coyote again that a lot of you have seen? Remember again, it's not necessarily, it's not abnormal to see a coyote during the day. It's not necessarily a cause for concern as long as that coyote runs away when he sees you. If he doesn't, again, if you have a pet or a child, you want to put yourself in between the pet and the child, but you want to haze them. I hope all of you, when you leave here, if you see a coyote, I hope you all will haze that coyote, no matter what method you choose. I hope you do something. And then again, if you do see that coyote, you want to look around, do a little investigative work. Is there anything in your yard that's attracting a coyote? Talk to your neighbors. Try to work together in your neighborhood to make sure you're not doing anything to attract coyotes in. Yeah. So, and again, if you learn nothing else, never ever feed coyotes. I think you all are too smart to do that, but just spread the word. So in conclusion, to prevent coyote conflicts, we have to change our behavior. by removing attractants, taking some precautions with our pets, teaching our kids to be smart around coyotes. And we have to change coyote behavior through hazing. And we all have to work together. So if you have questions about coyotes here in Bloomington, this is the email address that you want to email. I assume it's probably on your website as well. Or you can always feel free to contact me with any questions. I have cards up here if you want to take one with me. I would love to hear your stories. If you see a coyote and you haze them, I would love to hear about it. I'd love to hear, did it work? Did it not work? I would love to hear from you. So at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that anyone has. Yeah, so the question was, if you come across more than one coyote at a time, are they more likely to be aggressive? Or also, what would you do? If you come across more than one coyote at a time, they're not more likely to be aggressive, and typically there's one coyote in charge that the rest of the coyotes are taking their cue from. So what you want to do is you want to haze those coyotes just like they're one coyote. So haze the group of coyotes exactly the same way, and what they're going to do is that the one in charge, he's going to respond and the other coyotes will follow his lead. Okay. They do carry rabies, but it's pretty rare in coyotes. I don't think it's a problem here in this area. It's not a problem here at all. And in terms of coyotes biting people, actually very small number of cases are from rabies. It's actually usually healthy coyotes that do that. Yeah, I was just going to say mange. Throughout mange a problem here. Pretty much everywhere. Mange is it's a pretty common killer of coyotes. So it is something that they get. It's not something that makes them more. Doesn't make them more aggressive towards people or animals. Sometimes it makes them more visible because they're sick. If they'll take advantage of easy food. So you might see a mangy coyote around a neighborhood if someone's leaving food outside, because they'll take advantage of that. They're weak and they might not want to hunt. But yeah, so they should call you if you see a mangy coyote. Yes. So there's 2 times a year this happens. So it absolutely is your dog. So the reason that this happens when coyotes are following people with dogs, it's a large dog, and that's typically when this happens. They're trying to see, you're right, they're trying to see, is your dog a threat to their territory? So if it's this time of year, I bet there's a den nearby. So they're looking to see, is your dog a threat to their den? If it's wintertime, are they looking to see, is your dog a threat to their mate? So was your dog on a leash? Perfect, yeah. So your dog was on a leash, that's probably why you didn't have an encounter. So if you do that, if you see that dog again or the coyote again, I would haze. But again, now that you know that coyote's there, I don't know if you can avoid that specific area during this time of year. Yeah, you can haze the coyote. That would help. And again, that's why it's happening, I think, was your main question. And as long as your dog's on a leash, you should be okay. But if you can, you said it was in different parts. This does happen, and a lot of times this happens in parks in one little part of a park. If it's a park-specific area, if people can avoid that part, for just... I know, I was speaking more in a general sense. Sometimes this happens near a den, if people can avoid that part just for a few months in general. Question is, how do you tell the difference between a coyote and a fox? I don't know the exact measurements, but a fox is much smaller than a coyote, although you'd have to see them both to know. Fox is generally redder in color. But in terms of, if you're asking about how to behave towards a fox or a coyote, if you see a fox, you can haze a fox just like you would a coyote. They're actually easier to haze. Foxes in general are much less of a threat. It's very rare for them to attack a pet or bite a person, very, very rare. So, you can look at pictures online, you can see, but you kind of have to see both of them before you can tell which is which. But in general, if you're asking because you're concerned about either one, you can treat them both the same way. Coyotes use storm drains or catch basins for dens. I don't know. Possibly. They definitely use them as movement pathways. Typically for a den, a coyote will use a den that some other animal has abandoned, like a groundhog or something like that. But it's possible. Yeah. The typical lifespan of a coyote, if they're in captivity, can be similar to that of a large dog. So it could be 12 to 15 years. However, in the wild and urban areas, it's often 3 to 5 years. A lot of coyotes don't live to be 3. Road traffic mortality and mange are the 2 biggest cause of mortality. I guess I answered your question. So the 2 biggest causes of mortality are mange and and traffic. As far as animals, in urban areas, they don't really have a predator. Wolves sometimes will kill coyotes, but that's not really happening in our urban areas. A squirt gun, yeah. A squirt gun would be just as effective. You know, paintball guns and beanbag guns are great for coyotes, but those are typically ones that are very habituated. You don't have a big coyote problem here. If you want to carry something, a squirt gun, especially you can put some vinegar water in it, that will work really well for coyotes. What attracts them to it? Well, the vegetables. They'll eat the vegetables in the garden. You know, I don't know the question of any special kind of vegetables. That's a good question. In terms of what can discourage them, those motion detector sprinklers, I think would possibly good. Of course, there's fencing, but it had to be some pretty elaborate fencing. I don't hear a lot about coyotes in gardens. You know, I don't think it's necessarily a big attractor, but it's something to keep in mind if you see a coyote around your garden, that you could look into some deterrence. You know, it's throwing something in a coyote's chest. Is that recommended? It's something you can do. You know, I would probably recommend these other methods better. You know, you certainly don't want to harm the coyote, but you can, you know, or you can throw something towards the coyote, not necessarily at it. But yeah, I mean, if you don't have anything else, you know, and yelling isn't working, you can pick up some rocks and throw it towards them. Yeah. Well, it's their way of telling other coyote groups that this is their territory. So they're protecting their territory from other coyotes. But sometimes if a dog, I mean, sometimes they'll respond to dogs barking, you know, trying to send the same message. Also, ambulances, for some reason, really get coyotes howling. Well, I'll be here if anyone has any other questions and doesn't want to ask in front of the group. But otherwise, I hope this was helpful for you, and contact me anytime with questions, and thank you so much for coming.
I just want to add one piece real quick. You know, our speaker tonight is not from here, but Animal Control Officer Young and the other Animal Control Officer, Bill Forbes in town, are people that you're going to potentially deal with if you do have a coyote issue or question. You can contact the police department or Animal Control through any of the numbers that are probably available to you. It was on the website. This has been recorded, so they're going to play this again on Bloomington Cable. If you want to see it again, you think you missed something. So there's some more information out there, and don't hesitate to contact us if you have questions or concerns, okay? So again, I'd like to thank our speaker very much tonight. And thank you for coming.